Liam Payne didn't think much of the invitation when it first arrived. It was vague, cryptic even. An embossed black card with gold lettering that simply read, "Exclusive event. Saturday, 10 p.m. by invitation only." At the bottom, there was no name, just a location, an upscale mansion tucked away in the Hollywood Hills. His manager mentioned it was one of Diddy's infamous parties, whispered about in hushed tones across the industry. The kind of party where no cameras were allowed, where secrecy was the currency, and where the night could open doors to unimaginable opportunities, or shut them forever. "You should go," his manager had said. "It's where the deals happen, where the real movers and shakers decide who's in." Liam wasn't sure. He'd heard the rumors, the freak-offs, the insane amounts of drugs, the activities that no one dared to explain in detail. But his curiosity won out. What was the worst that could happen? A room full of celebrities, champagne, and music? Maybe this was what he needed to revive his career. On Saturday night, Liam arrived at the mansion dressed to impress. A white silk shirt, black pants, and an easy confidence he wore like armor. He pulled up to the sprawling estate, where security guarded the gates like watchful hawks. The party glowed inside with golden light spilling out of massive floor-to-ceiling windows. He adjusted his collar, gave his name to the valet, and stepped inside. The air was electric. Laughter, music, the clink of champagne glasses. Everyone wore masks, sleek and extravagant, adding an air of mystery to the scene. Celebrities, influencers, and moguls milled about, some already with that dazed, glassy-eyed look that only came after too much alcohol, or something stronger. Liam slipped on the mask handed to him by a server and tried to blend in. It wasn't long before he saw Diddy, standing at the center of it all, the gravitational pull of the room. He wore a silver mask adorned with black feathers, his sharp eyes peering out from beneath it. When their eyes met, Diddy smiled, clapping Liam on the shoulder. "Liam," Diddy said, his voice smooth as silk. "Glad you made it. You're in for a real night. Just be open, my friend." Liam nodded, unsure of what to say. He was struck by how casually Diddy spoke, as if they'd known each other for years. The older man's charisma was undeniable, but there was something beneath it, something calculating and unnerving. The night wore on. Guests drank, danced, and disappeared into side rooms for who knows what. Servers passed around trays of champagne and cocktails, but Liam began to notice that some glasses were laced with something. Tiny pinkish powder swirled in the liquid. A drug he later learned was called Tusi, or pink cocaine. It was the party drug of the elite, designed to lower inhibitions and blur boundaries. "Try it," a woman urged him, her voice syrupy and slow. "You'll feel free. Everyone here's doing it." He declined, but his discomfort grew. It wasn't just the drugs. It was the way people moved through the mansion, their masks hiding more than their faces. Conversations were hushed. Laughter was sharp, cutting through the air like a warning. And then, Liam saw it, the moment that changed everything. He was wandering through the house, hoping to find some fresh air, when he heard muffled voices coming from a half-closed door at the end of a hallway. At first, he wasn't going to stop, but then he heard a name he recognized, a famous TV host, someone beloved and family-friendly. Curiosity pulled him forward. The room beyond was dimly lit, flickering with candlelight. In the center stood the TV host, their hands tied behind their back. They looked dazed, their movements sluggish as though they'd been drugged. Around them stood three people, their masks concealing their faces. One of them was Diddy, unmistakable even beneath the silver feathers. He held a small vial of pink powder, Tusi, and was pouring it onto a tray as the others watched. The host stumbled, mumbling incoherently, but Diddy's voice cut through the air, calm and commanding. "Relax," he said, his tone sharp yet strangely soothing. "This is how you show your loyalty. Just a taste, and you'll see." Liam's stomach turned as one of the masked figures grabbed the TV host by the shoulders, forcing them to their knees. The tray was pushed in front of them, the pink powder glimmering in the faint light. The camera in the corner blinked red, capturing everything. Liam took a step back, his heart pounding, but the floor creaked under his weight. The room went silent. Diddy's head snapped toward the door, his piercing gaze locking onto Liam. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Diddy smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that sent a chill down Liam's spine. "Liam, he said, his voice low and steady. "You shouldn't be here." Liam didn't wait to find out what would happen next. He turned and bolted down the hallway, his pulse thundering in his ears. He shoved past partygoers, his mask slipping off as he made his way to the exit. He didn't care about blending in anymore. He just needed to leave. Outside, he fumbled with his car keys, his hands shaking. As he sped away from the mansion, he felt like he couldn't breathe, like he was suffocating under the weight of what he'd just seen. The weeks that followed were a blur. Liam couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. He felt like he was being watched, like someone was always 2 steps behind him. Cars lingered outside his house. He started getting strange calls, static on the other end, followed by a click. He thought about going public, but how could he? Who would believe him? He was just a singer, while Diddy was untouchable. Every time he convinced himself to speak up, he thought about the camera, about how many other faces had probably been caught on tape, and how easily those tapes could be used to destroy lives. Years passed, but the fear never left him. He moved to London, then to South America, hoping to outrun whatever shadows were following him. But the night of the party haunted him, the TV host's glassy eyes, Diddy's smile, the camera. Liam was staying at a luxury hotel in Buenos Aires, hoping to finally find some peace. He'd started to believe that maybe he was safe, that maybe the past was behind him. But one night, while sitting on the balcony of his suite, he heard it, a voice, soft and familiar, cutting through the still night air. "Take that. Take that." Liam froze, his blood running cold. The voice came again, louder this time. "Take that. Take that." He turned, but the balcony was empty. The room was silent, and then he fell. The headlines the next day were grim. Former One Direction member Liam Payne dies in tragic fall from Buenos Aires hotel. The official story was that he had possible committed self-deletion, possibly after taking the same drug Tusi he saw the night of the party. But those who knew him, really knew him, weren't convinced. One thing was certain. Liam Payne had seen something that night at the mansion, something he was never supposed to see. I had no business being at a party like this. I wasn't famous, I wasn't rich, and I certainly wasn't part of Hollywood's inner circle. The only reason I even got in was because my friend Jenna had some connection to Diddy's assistant. She begged and pulled strings until somehow both of our names ended up on the guest list. When she told me about the invite, I couldn't believe it. "Diddy's throwing one of his legendary parties," Jenna had said, practically shaking with excitement. "Everyone's going to be there. LeBron, J-Lo, Rick Ross, you name it." It sounded like a dream, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to mingle with the elite. I didn't even hesitate. If I'd known what would happen, I'd have ripped that invitation to shreds. The party was exactly as extravagant as I'd imagined. The mansion was massive, glowing under soft golden lights, with valet attendants dressed in crisp suits, ushering guests inside. The air buzzed with excitement as we walked in, everyone dressed in white, sipping champagne from crystal flutes. Jenna and I were nobodies in a sea of celebrities, but we blended in just enough to not raise any eyebrows. Inside, I felt like I was stepping into another world. The music was low and hypnotic, the kind that made your chest vibrate. Guests moved through the rooms with an easy grace, laughing and clinking glasses. I spotted LeBron James almost immediately, standing near the bar with a small group of people. He had his phone in his hand, casually recording the scene like he was documenting the night. Then there was Diddy. He entered the room like a king, every head turning as he strode to the center. His energy was magnetic, his smile wide and disarming. He greeted LeBron with a handshake, then glanced around the room as if assessing everyone present. For a brief moment, his eyes locked with mine. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. "New face," Diddy said as he approached me. His voice was smooth, warm, but there was something in his gaze that felt heavy, predatory. "What's your name?" "Mia," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Welcome, Mia," he said, his smile widening. "Stick around tonight. You're going to see something special." I nodded, unsure of what to say. His words lingered in my mind as he walked away, joining LeBron and the others near the bar. I watched as they exchanged a few words before disappearing down a side hallway. The night wore on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Diddy's words had meant something more. I told myself I was overthinking it, but when I noticed Jenna had disappeared with someone, I decided to explore. My curiosity led me down the same hallway Diddy and LeBron had gone. At the end of it, I found a set of heavy double doors, slightly ajar. From inside, I could hear faint murmurs and low laughter. I peeked through the gap, my heart pounding. The room was dimly lit, with dark velvet drapes covering the walls and a circular platform at its center. Around the platform stood about a dozen people, all dressed in white. Diddy was there, holding a bottle of baby oil, his movements slow and deliberate as he poured it over two women standing on the platform. They were completely still, their faces blank, blindfolds covering their eyes. LeBron stood off to the side, his phone raised, recording everything. His expression was neutral, almost detached, as if this was just another night. I couldn't understand why he was filming, or who he was filming for. The atmosphere in the room was suffocating, the air thick with something I couldn't explain. My gaze dropped to the floor, and that's when I saw it. Symbols drawn in some kind of glowing substance, intricate patterns that seemed to pulse faintly under the dim light. Diddy began to speak, his voice low and rhythmic like a chant. The symbols on the floor seemed to ripple in response, and the shadows in the room started to move, stretching and curling unnaturally. My chest tightened as the two women on the platform swayed, their bodies moving in eerie unison, like puppets on invisible strings. The shadows grew darker, denser, shifting into shapes that didn't make sense. Tall, twisting figures that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. I stumbled back, my breath hitching in my throat. LeBron glanced toward the door, his eyes meeting mine. His expression didn't change, but he raised a finger to his lips as if to say, "Stay quiet." Then everything went black. I woke up the next morning in my own bed, fully dressed. My head pounded and my mouth was dry. At first I thought I'd dreamed everything, but when I sat up I saw the white dress I'd worn to the party crumpled on the floor. The faint scent of baby oil lingered on it, and the memories came flooding back. Diddy, the symbols, the shadows, LeBron's phone recording everything. But after that, nothing. I couldn't remember how I'd gotten home or what had happened after I blacked out. Jenna didn't have any answers either. When I called her, she just laughed it off, saying she'd left with a guy and figured I'd caught a ride home. "You were probably just drunk," she said. "You're lucky you didn't embarrass yourself in front of anyone important." But I knew I hadn't been drunk. Something had happened in that room, something I couldn't explain. And I needed to know what it was. Months passed, but I couldn't let it go. The memory of that night haunted me. I became obsessed, combing through social media and news sites for any clues about the party, but there was nothing. No photos, no mentions, not even a hint that it had happened. Finally, in a moment of desperation, I sent LeBron a message on Instagram. I kept it short, vague. "Hi, I think we were both at Diddy's party a while ago. I think you were recording something. Do you still have that video? I just need to know what happened." I didn't expect him to reply, but a day later I saw the notification. "LeBron James has sent you a message." My heart raced as I opened it. His response was short, just 6 words. "Ain't no party like a Diddy party." Before I could reply, I saw the second notification. "LeBron James has blocked you." I stared at my screen, my stomach sinking. The message wasn't an answer. It was a warning. I'll never know what really happened that night, or why I blacked out. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still see those shifting shadows and hear Diddy's voice, smooth and commanding. "You're going to see something special." And every now and then, I catch myself looking over my shoulder, wondering if someone's watching. Because one thing is clear, whatever I saw that night, I wasn't supposed to remember. The first whispers came from the kind of circles that don't make headlines. The assistants, the bodyguards, the staff who clean up after the rich and powerful. Rumors about what went down at Diddy's infamous freak-offs weren't exactly new, but what caught my attention this time was a name I never expected to hear. Steve Harvey. The man was a household name, king of comedy, game show icon, and the face of wholesome family entertainment. The idea of him being tangled up in something as grotesque as the things people said happened at those parties? Unbelievable. But Hollywood has a way of hiding its darkness behind toothy smiles and expensive suits. It all started with one party. Steve Harvey wasn't the type to go to Diddy's freak-offs, at least not publicly. His image was too clean, too perfect. but apparently, Diddy had personally invited him. "This is a different kind of celebration," Diddy reportedly told him. "A night to let loose. To be real." Steve hesitated at first. He had too much to lose. But Diddy had a way of making people feel like saying no wasn't an option. And so, on a quiet night, under the guise of networking, Steve slipped away to the private mansion where the party was being held. By all accounts, the party started like most of Diddy's infamous gatherings. Luxury everywhere you looked, champagne flowing, celebrities mingling in their finest white attire. But as the night wore on, the masks came off, figuratively and literally. People disappeared into side rooms. The music shifted to something slower, more hypnotic, and the air grew heavier, charged with an unspoken energy. Steve wasn't used to this kind of scene. He kept to himself at first, nursing a drink and cracking a few jokes with familiar faces. But then Diddy approached, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "Steve," Diddy said, his voice smooth, inviting. "You can't just sit back and watch. You're not here to observe. You're here to experience." Steve hesitated, but Diddy leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You've been working too hard, man. Always carrying that perfect image, holding it all together. Don't you want to let go, just for one night?" Steve laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. "Man, I'm just here to celebrate, that's all." But Diddy wasn't having it. He led Steve to one of the back rooms, where the real party was happening. What Steve saw behind that door would change everything. Steve and Diddy were at the forefront, their laughter cutting through the low hum of murmured voices and hypnotic music. Together, they indulged in every depraved act imaginable. They touched, pulled, forced, degraded, treating the women as objects, nothing more than tools for their dark desires. The women's pleas, muffled under the weight of the room's oppressive atmosphere, seemed to fade into the background as Steve and Diddy took turns, their actions growing more grotesque with each passing moment. They weren't alone in their depravity. The other attendees cheered them on, some joining in, others watching with sick fascination as the scene on the platform devolved into a spectacle of pure exploitation. Every boundary was crossed, every line erased, until the room felt like it was suffocating under the weight of what was happening. For Steve, it started with hesitation, small, fleeting moments of discomfort that Diddy quickly erased with his commanding presence. "Let it go," Diddy whispered, handing him a drink laced with something Steve couldn't identify. "No one's judging you here. This is freedom." When Steve woke up the next morning, he barely remembered the details. Flashes of the night came back to him in pieces. The platform, the women, the things he did. He chalked it up to the alcohol and told himself it wasn't as bad as it seemed. But the guilt lingered. A week later, the message came. It wasn't from Diddy directly, of course. People like him never got their hands dirty. But the text was clear. "We have footage. You're going to want to keep this between us." Steve's stomach dropped. At first, he thought it was a bluff, but then a link came through, a short clip. It was grainy, shot from a low angle, but there was no mistaking it. It was him, on that platform, doing things that would destroy everything he'd worked for, his career, his family, his legacy. Panic set in. He called Diddy, demanding an explanation. "You said this was private," he yelled. Diddy didn't miss a beat. "It is. But you signed the NDA, Steve. You knew what you were walking into." "I didn't sign up to be recorded," Steve snapped. Diddy chuckled, his tone unnervingly calm. "You signed the NDA," he repeated. "And those tapes? They're worth more than you think. I suggest you relax and trust me to handle this." But Steve couldn't relax. He started to spiral, canceling appearances, pulling back from his usual over-the-top personality. His family noticed, especially Lori, his stepdaughter. She asked him what was wrong, but he couldn't bring himself to tell her. And then Diddy called again. "Steve," he said, his tone light, almost friendly. "We need to talk. There's something you can do for me that'll make this all go away." "What the hell are you talking about?" Steve asked, his voice trembling. "It's simple," Diddy said. "Your stepdaughter, Lori, she's a trophy, man, a prize. Me and my boy, we want her." Steve's heart stopped. "You're out of your mind. Think about it," Diddy continued, unbothered by Steve's outburst. "One little introduction, one small favor, and this tape, it's gone. No one ever sees it. Your reputation stays intact." Steve hung up, disgusted, but the calls didn't stop, and the longer he sat with the knowledge of what was on that tape, the more he began to crack. His guilt, his fear, his desperation, it ate away at him. Eventually, Steve made the call. Lori was seen with Diddy and his son at several events over the next few months. The tabloids speculated, but no one knew the truth. Not then. But Diddy's empire was crumbling. The rumors that had followed him for years, the drugs, the exploitation, the trafficking, they were starting to catch up with him. The authorities had been investigating for months, building a case, and when they raided one of his properties, they found everything they needed, including the tapes. When the news broke, it was everywhere. Diddy was arrested on charges of human trafficking, drug distribution, and countless other crimes. The tapes were the smoking gun, filled with damning evidence of his parties and the horrors that went on behind closed doors. Steve watched the coverage from his home, his hands shaking. He knew the tape of him was out there, sitting in some evidence locker waiting to be discovered. His involvement hadn't been made public yet, but it was only a matter of time. He tried to move on, to act like everything was normal, but he couldn't escape the memory of that night. The things he did, the things he allowed to happen. The look on Lori's face when she realized she'd been used. Diddy was behind bars, but Steve was trapped in a prison of his own making. Because no matter how far he ran, how hard he tried to bury the truth, he couldn't escape the man he'd become. And one day, when he looked in the mirror, all he could see was the monster from that tape.